All right. Let me see if there are any questions first. There are a few things I wanted to say about this week's material, but do you have any questions before we start?
I had a question.
All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about the singleton pattern first, and then we will also talk about the adapter pattern. But
Professor, can you hear us?
we also need to talk a little bit about the exam, which is next week, the first exam. So there are three things we need to talk about. All right, let's talk about the singleton pattern. All right. One of the questions in the quiz that was due last night, I think it was question 5, may have been a bit misleading, and I probably owe a point to some of you who might have answered one of the other three options, one of the options other than the marked right answer. So let me talk about this. So what is it that we are interested here? What are we talking about? We are talking about the singleton pattern. Okay, so if you have a class, normally you put a public constructor. If my class is your class name, then you put a public constructor. So anybody can create an instance. And the general wisdom is that if you want only one instance of this, then you should make this private. And that is not an unreasonable thing to say. Then nobody can create an instance of this from the outside. That is why we have an instance method, which will create an instance of my class and then return that instance. So that is the general wisdom. But you could also do this by having something like this: class, my class, and actually having a protected constructor, protected my class. Okay, so like this. Then what is the deal here? Well, Java has some funny rules regarding my class, regarding with respect to packages, but let's ignore all that. Let's assume that only subclasses can access this constructor. If that is the case, you cannot write new my class from the outside. So you cannot create an instance of this from the outside. I see that some of you have questions.
I think that there's several students in that Zoom meeting that you made for the updated.
Oh, they are waiting.
I just left from that meeting and there were like 10 or more students in there.
Huh.
You want me to go back in there and tell them this is the one?
Yeah, this is the regular class meeting, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is, yeah, please, if you can do that, that would really be helpful. Yeah.
Professor?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. I think something was weird with the sound earlier in class.
Oh, you are not able to hear me properly?
No, I think you weren't able to hear us.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Yeah. Me, I don't know whether I had turned off my speakers or something. It could have been that. Let's see how many people are here right now. Um, for a second, let me stop sharing. We have about 17. Yeah. I'm sorry about the confusion. We had an interesting morning regarding office hours, talking about office hours. So it is not fully resolved as to what we faculty are supposed to do. So we were told not to have any um, by appointment business. So, okay. Okay. Maybe I'll wait for a couple of minutes for others to join. Let me see if you can hit 25 before I continue. I'll wait for a minute. Yes, we have 25. I think we only have about 27 students or so. So maybe I will continue. So I am quite sorry about any confusion that you might have had about which Zoom meeting to go to. The reason we have all those extra Zoom meetings is because this morning I received an email message from the administration saying it is not acceptable to have by appointment office hours, that we have to have exact hours. So I said, okay, I will have exact hours and I will have Zoom meetings for all those hours. Although it just eats up bandwidth for no reason when nobody shows up, that's fine with me. I don't have any problems. So that's why I created all those extra meetings, and that might have confused you. So I'm sorry about it. I still don't know what the final ruling is regarding office hours, whether we have to have those Zoom sessions in place. If not, I will probably delete all those Zoom meetings. The reason being, it is probably more confusing to you to have all those things show up. I still don't know the answer. Maybe I will get an answer tomorrow, but don't bet on it. Okay. Oh, I think you should. Aren't you able to unmute yourself? Somebody asked some questions, so that's why I'm wondering. Can you try to unmute yourself and see whether you can speak?
Yes, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay, should be good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for checking it out. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, so there are three things I wanted to say. One was regarding singleton pattern. The second one is on the adapter pattern, and the third is on the first exam. So let's go back to what I was saying regarding the singleton pattern. Right. Let me go ahead and share my whiteboard. So what I was saying before many of you joined was that when you have a class with a public constructor, it can be created by any class, any code that has access to this class. So for a second, assume that my class is having a public constructor instead of this protected constructor. Then anybody can create new my class, no problem. But the question is, if you want a singleton class, what should you have? There was a question in the quiz that was due last night, the home quiz that you needed to take before the meeting. I think it was question 5. And there was a question as to whether it should be protected or private. I had marked the correct answer as private, but that is not strictly true, I think. I'll tell you why. If you have a class named my class, and if you put a protected constructor, then you cannot, I mean, you can put a protected constructor here, but the thing is, it will not be, it will be, if you leave it like this, what happens? I think I need more space. Let me retype this so that I have more space. So it's a bit, what do you call, bit subtle, actually. Public class, my class. Protected my class. Let's leave it like this. And if you have a code like this, then obviously you can't do this kind of thing unless you are in the same package. So there are some funny rules regarding access to protected members in Java. So I'm going to ignore that for the moment. So I'm going to say new my class is not possible. Of course, if you put all this in the same package, then this is possible. Okay. So I'm going to ignore that rule, that if the code here that creates my class is, I'm going to ignore that it is in the same package. Let's assume it is in a different package. Then you cannot do new my class, right? So this cannot even be instantiated. So what you need is obviously something like public my class, static my class, and have the instance method here, which is what we have in the book and the videos. We create an instance of my class, new my, if, I mean, you check whether there is you have to have a static field. If it is null, if static field is null, this is pseudocode, obviously. Static field, set static field to new my class. And return the static field. So that can be, then somebody can say my class dot instance, and then this will create an instance of this and return. But then what is the problem? The problem is that this can be subclassed. So you can create a subclass of my class and invoke the constructor of my class willy-nilly as many times as you please and create multiple instances of my class. So then my class is not a singleton anymore. So what you need is something else. You need a check here that says if you are creating an instance of my class, then that is if creating an instance of my class throw an exception. But then this won't work anymore because you are creating an instance of my class instance. So you can have a second constructor, which is also protected. But then it can be subclassed and then you again run into the same problem. So as long as you are not subclassing my class, everything will work. So, what we need is the guarantee that you are not subclassing this. If you ever subclass my class, then you are in trouble. So in that sense, you need a private constructor. But if there is an understanding that my class will never be subclassed, then protected access is okay. But then that is a very strong requirement. So one could say that if there is no subclassing allowed, then protected constructor is okay. So if anybody answered with that assumption, then I think I owe that student a point. But otherwise, the constructor has to be private. Okay, that is one thing I wanted to clarify. I'll stop here and then ask if you have any questions. Anybody? It's a very, what do you call, subtle issue, but that is true only if you never allow any subclassing.
Then that will violate what OOP stands for, right? Because for OOP, the idea is to subclass, and you can't control, right?
You can't
When
control.
somebody will subclass something, right?
Yeah, that is
so
correct.
By enforcing that private, you're saying you can't do it.
Yeah, but by enforcing putting that private, you cannot.
Constructor.
You can
Yeah.
always put a condition here saying if you are creating an instance of my class, I'll throw an exception. But the private class can be used for creating an instance of my class. That's why we have two constructors to take care of subclassing. You are correct. So it is a very, very subtle issue, and it's a very strong requirement that you are not going to allow any subclassing. But one could argue that, I suppose. So if one thought about all that, then that is not a bad thought. At least you are thinking about it, so all those issues, which is good. But when you create a class, you might expect it to be subclassed unless you say it is I think if you make this class final, you cannot subclass it. Right? So for example, the string class in Java is final. You cannot subclass the string class. So you could put, instead of writing public class, my class, you could write public final class. That is you can't have subclasses of it. Then a protected constructor is fine. Very, very subtle issues. But then again, let me tell you, if you have a class in the same package, that will be able to access this protected constructor. That is another hole. But then, of course, you are, I mean, that you're talking about Java then. I mean, so a lot of issues. But the easiest thing is to make the constructor private, then there is absolutely no problem. Any other questions? All right, then let me clear this. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was regarding the adapter pattern. This seems to confuse students quite a bit. When you have an adapter pattern, what you are trying to do is, can I accomplish some functionality without starting programming from the scratch, from first principles? Instead of coding everything by myself, can I use an existing class? For example, if you want to have a collection class for, say, students in a university, so you want to create a class called student list. You have done these kinds of things in ICS 240. You created linked lists, you used arrays, you might have used trees, so many things, right? But that requires a lot of programming. But people have already come up with collection classes in Java, for example, array list or linked list or vector. Okay, so why don't we use one of those? So we could write private linked list, my list, or maybe students equals new linked list. So I will put methods like public void add student. And I can write students.add student. And I can have methods to remove student, or maybe retrieve a student with some ID or whatever. I am going to work on this field, students. The linked list class has all the methods I need to add, remove, search for, etc., etc. And if there are any special things you might want to do, then I can use a combination of methods in linked list to do that with my own extra logic. Okay, so I don't need many more fields here. I don't need an array here. I don't need a node. I don't need any linked list, extra linked stuff, none of that. So this is called the adaptee. The linked list is the adaptee. Student list is an adapter. It uses the adaptee to accomplish some requirements. Linked list already satisfies certain requirements. It implements the list interface. Student list is more specialized. It is dealing with students, so it is not as general as linked list, but the functionalities are not all that different. You might want to say add student and only add students who meet certain qualifications, perhaps. Remove students, only remove students who meet certain requirements, etc., etc. But that may not be the case with linked list, right? When you add, it will simply add. When you remove, it will simply remove. There is no check. All those checks, all those validations, etc., can be done by you to meet requirements that are on top of a more standard collection. This is not a very general thing. The list of students, that is only geared for the purpose of storing students in a certain setting. So you are seeking the help of a class that has been tested and is available to you. The advantage is, even if there are bugs in this linked list class, even, let's assume that there is a bug, hopefully it will get fixed sometime soon, and then your code will benefit that fix. Whereas if you start from scratch, there are so many bugs that you need to take care of right away. If you use the source code for linked list and copy and paste it here and try to modify it, that is going to be a very difficult task, because you have to understand somebody else's code. And that is not easy. That will take quite a bit of time. Probably it is better to write your own than start from scratch, than understand somebody else's code. One common mistake that I find is, oops, I didn't want to put red all over the place. Okay, let me go ahead and make this blue. Okay. A common mistake that I find students doing is they start putting extra things, private int number of students. This is a mistake. The reason being, if you want to keep track of the number of students, you can ask the students field, students dot size. So if you write students dot size, which is actually correct. So let me, this is perfect. You can use students dot size to get the number of students. You don't need an array to store the students. The students are already here. So this linked list is the adaptee and the student list is an adapter, and we are using the adapter pattern. This is called an object adapter because you are using an object of type linked list. Okay, then you can have all the methods you wish. None of the methods of linked list is available to the user of student list. The user of student list gets the methods you define. So this is called an object adapter. The second way of creating an adapter is to use what is called a class adapter. So instead of having a field like this, oops, so I didn't know how to do that. Okay, anyway, can't help it now. Okay, you would do like this: public class student list extends linked list. Then student list has all of the methods of linked list by inheritance. So you'll have add, remove, and whatever methods in linked list, they are all inherited here. And any user of student list will be able to access any method of linked list unless you override it and do something to prevent that access. So you could, if you don't want people to be using that add method of linked list, you can do like this. I don't quite remember what the return type of add is. Maybe it is void. I don't quite remember, but you can write like this. Do nothing. If you get a student, if somebody tries to use the add method of linked list, or maybe even object here, I will refuse to pass it on. So calling the add method doesn't accomplish anything, but I will do something like this. Add student. And what I will do is super.add student. I will call the linked list add method myself. So I'm not allowing people to be using the add method of linked list, but they have to call the add student method of linked list. They can call this, but nothing will be accomplished. So this is called a class adapter. If you want to expose all the methods or most of the methods of the adaptee, then this is a good thing to have. For example, for another project that I was doing, I extended text field so that even if the user didn't enter anything, it would return a space so that my rest of the programming was easier. I don't have the code of that here, but I extended a text field. So I had something like this: public class my text field extends.
Professor, can I just a quick question? In the previous example, which you just deleted, when you had that add method that was accomplishing nothing, if the signature is the same as the super's add method, do we have to proceed it with add override or not?
That is always a good idea, so that you don't make a mistake.
Okay.
But yeah, I didn't put that at override, but it is.
It's just
highly advisable to put that.
It's just for the compiler to check for any differences.
Any typos, yeah. Instead of a D, you might have typed C or something. Then it'll catch that.
So just so I understand, like the at override will confirm that you typed the method signature correctly, but it doesn't actually have any effect on the compilation or running of the project, right?
No, it is just a benefit afforded to you. Yeah. Oops. What am I typing? Okay, so I have my text field, extends text field. This is more or less what I did. I just had one method here, public string get text. You have used text field in the second project, and you know what this does, right? So my problem was, if the user didn't enter anything, this was a big problem. There were so many text fields where so many text fields in my graphical user interface, and the user might enter nothing in many of them. And then I had to check if they were null and all that. So what I did was I just created an extension of my text fields. This is a class adapter, and simply check this. If super dot get text equals null, if there was nothing entered, or actually I think if I remember correctly, this may be what I did, or super dot get text dot dot equals the empty one space. No, sorry, this is what I did. The empty string, then, okay, let me see, return one space. Return super.getText. This is essentially what I had. Maybe I had super.getText done first, stored it in a variable or something, but that is beside the point. If there was nothing entered, if the user just neglected the text field altogether, or if the user maybe have for somehow managed an empty string to be passed, perhaps by typing in something and then backspacing or something. I don't know when. I just put this as a safeguard. I return one space so that a large part of my code didn't have to deal with this special case. I didn't have to put this all over my code because I realized this quite late and I didn't want to fix so many different places in my code. And this, all I did was I changed all my text field to my text field and everything worked just fine after that. And I wanted all of the other methods of text field to be available, you know. Only thing is I wanted get text to be fixed a little bit. Okay, any questions about this? Anything
Professor, can you summarize succinctly, like you sort of talked about some of the reasons a little bit in the explanation, but when use an object adapter and when use a class adapter? Is there a sort of a succinct answer to that?
Yeah, you would use an object adapter if you don't want any of the, or you don't want many or most of the methods of the adaptee to be exposed. Okay, but then you would use an object adapter. You would use a class adapter when you want most of it or a good part of it to be exposed to the user. This is a very good example of this. So the user can use my text field and is not limited in any way. They can still do all the issue all the methods of text field with no change. And I don't have to code any of those here. They are automatically available. Whereas if I use an object adapter, I have to code every method that I want the user to be able to see. If this would have been it would have been a really bad idea to have this as an object adapter, because then what would I do? I wouldn't have this. I will have to create private text field. Then I have to keep on doing these kinds of things, you know, text field get text field dot get text. And to expose all the other methods, I will have to code every one of them. That would be very painful. And whenever text field changes, I will have to keep adding the extra methods. If there were 100 methods in text field, I will have to code all the 100 methods. And if they added 10 more 2 years from now, I will have to add those 10 methods if I wanted all of them to be exposed. That is a terrible thing to do.
Is it possible to use both adapters together, like implementing some Facebook and using
class adapter and object adapter together?
Yes.
Yes, actually we will see when we see the first class project, we will see that in one context. We will use both ideas in the same place. The advantage, it's a good, interesting question. The reason being, my text field does not get the text field type, right? It is just it is inheriting from object. So it is not of type text field at all. In fact, you cannot even put this as, put this in your Java FX grid pane, for example, because this is not going to work as such. I will have to do some more massaging before this can actually be put into the GUI window, right? So the advantage of class adapter is you get that type and you get all the methods also. but getting the methods might be a liability, and perhaps even getting the type. I don't know. That depends on the situation. But you could also see it as an advantage, getting that type, probably more often than not. So if you want to inherit somebody's type, then you want to have a class adapter. But if you don't want to expose those types, then you need an object adapter. We'll see an interesting case when we implement the library. Okay, but it's a good question to think about.
Thanks, Professor.
Any questions? Okay, all right. If there are no more questions, let me close this and talk about the first exam. The first exam is next week. Everything that we covered through this week would be fair game to ask on the exam. There is a little document on the D12 site under exam 1. Take a look. There will be 2 parts in the exam. One will be a quiz on D12, many multiple choice questions, maybe some multi-select questions, maybe some true false kind of stuff, worth about 50 points, but I don't want to be saying it is exactly 50 points, but roughly. And then 2 questions involving Java programming that would cover some of the topics that we have discussed, or many of the topics that we have discussed. And you will need to write Java code, implement them, and test them. You don't have to write any documentation. I will try to emphasize that point in the exam too, but you don't need to write any documentation, but you need to write code with proper identifiers and good readability so that I can finish grading the exam in a reasonable amount of time. Okay. If you start using variable names like P, Q, R and all that, I will take off points. And you will have 3 hours for the exam, and it will start a little after 6, after I say a few words or maybe answer some brief questions. And you will have 3 hours. And I will not allow any submission after 9:20. If you take extra time, you will lose 1 point per minute that you take extra. And in any case, I will not allow any submissions after 9:20, right? Normally the exam will be due by 9:10. So you might have an extra 10 minutes, but then you are risking points after that because of late penalty. You need to have your video on, audio off. And if you have any questions, send me a message on the chat window. I will be monitoring the chat window unlike regular class time. Okay, so I will be monitoring this, and then if you need some interaction to answer your question, I will take you to a breakout room. We can talk and then come back. Right? So that will be the way we will be having the exam. Any questions about that?
Yeah, I had a question. So your new posted office hours, that begins this Friday, correct?
That started today. So yeah, and I don't know. And honestly, I don't know what the administration wants us to do. And if they say you don't have to have the Zoom hours posted, that I don't have to have the Zoom meeting all going, then I will probably not have any of those Zoom meetings, because it just consumes bandwidth for absolutely no reason. I felt like some of the shops in the shopping mall, where nobody goes and they just sit there doing nothing, So I think, but today, for example, I had like, I mean, I got this message around 11:30 or so. Then I immediately created the Zoom meetings and all that, and I sat there for an hour and 45 minutes or so till 1:30, and then. And if that is what they want us to do, I will continue doing that. But otherwise, I will probably close all that. I'll cancel all those meetings, because it's probably not going to be very convenient for you either. I mean, I decide some hours and then it may not work out for you. You might be working somewhere, or you might be having other things to do. For me, and I think for you too, appointment might be the best way. But if this is what they want to do, I will definitely do that. I am not going to be insubordinate to anyone.
Okay, so you would, okay, so just emailing you and getting an appointment is still probably the best action if we had questions.
That's not a problem at all. Even now, those things remain. Okay. I mean, those things are still good. If you want an appointment at 8 o'clock in the evening on a particular night, and if I'm not teaching or if I don't have anything else going on, I will definitely come and do it. Please do that. I mean, don't feel constrained. Okay. I'm just saying I'm having those Zoom sessions because I think that is what the college wants me to do. And I'm not even sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just assumed. Okay. Any other questions? So don't hesitate to ask for an appointment. Okay. I will come. I will try to find something that fits both of us. Any other questions? So don't forget the exam next week. I'm going to stop recording anyway.